This is the section on daily inspections. There are 5 separate lessons within this being the first one, where we will introduce the daily inspection and how threat and error management can be considered. Then we follow it with a practical presented by the Gliding Federation of Australia, which is very good. Then we'll look at a K13 and how we can confirm that that has been rigged correctly. We'll have a section on positive control checks, just to chat about those, and then finally the paperwork. So we'll move on now to the first section. In this first lesson on daily inspections, what we're going to cover is this. First, a reappraisal of threat and error management, bearing in mind daily inspections, exactly what a daily inspection is and why we do it, the sorts of threats which will impact on the daily inspection, and the typical errors that we might find we make. So just to remind you about threat and error management, threats basically reduce safety margins and they're not in your control. Errors are mistakes or omissions that you might make, and the undesired aircraft state is the outcome. So the undesired aircraft state is the aircraft is flying at the wrong speed or in the wrong place, or most importantly for this exercise, in the wrong configuration. If the aircraft is in the wrong configuration, it has not been assembled correctly perhaps, or the settings have been incorrectly set by the pilot, which of course there's nothing that you can do about that. Or there's something else fundamentally wrong. The CFG is wrong, the aircraft has worn parts on it, or controls aren't working properly. The daily inspection itself is a mitigation against the glider ending up in an undesired aircraft state through poor preparation for flight. Ultimately, the captain has the responsibility of ensuring this aircraft's fit to fly, but of course if you're doing the daily inspection, you can do your bit towards making that happen. If we take an extract from Laws and Rules, you can see here inspection before flight is a mandatory exercise for any gliding club belonging to the British Gliding Association, which most do, and it says that they should be the aircraft should be inspected before flight, and that is just common sense when you think about it. So daily inspections, fundamentally I've highlighted the important parts from Laws and Rules. The pilot in command is ultimately responsible, so just because as a pilot someone tells you the aircraft has been inspected doesn't let you off the task of making sure that you're happy about that. The DI itself, the daily inspection, is a safety critical task. If we don't get it right, then we can have a serious outcome in flight. And the aircraft flight manual is your main source of information regarding how the aircraft is assembled and what you should be looking for. And each aircraft is a little different. Going back to threat and error management now, if we look at threats, they come in 2 flavors. We can have what we call external threats and internal threats. And we're just going to take a look at those external and internal threats from a daily inspection viewpoint. So external threats, this looks like rather a long list, but if you think about the sorts of things that can go wrong with your glider, they can be it's not correctly rigged, it has had maintenance partially completed but not fully completed, and of course in the voluntary world of gliding that's perfectly possible. Now a club member comes along trying to do right by the club, does some maintenance, doesn't finish it off, the aircraft is left in an unsatisfactory condition, and he goes off and has a beer with his mates. And these things do sadly happen from time to time. Loose objects in the cockpit, things like going all the way from spanners to lumps of wood or coins even in the bottom. So the aircraft needs to be, you need to think that this aircraft could be turned upside down, perhaps in a loop or something like that. Anything in the bottom is going to end up in the canopy. Make sure everything is secure. There's nothing that shouldn't be there, and there's nothing loose in the cockpit. Environmental damage is the sorts of things that might happen from either wind or rain, some sort of weather event which can damage aircraft. It might be rodents and mice or rats or spiders or Lord knows what else. Handling damage, so the aircraft just being put in and out the hangar can be damaged. Wear and tear is a classic, and of course gliders are continually wearing. That's what happens as they get older. No, wear doesn't unwear itself, so they continually wear, and at some point this wear becomes unacceptable. In normal terms, the wear is something that the inspector will allow for. So he'll look at perhaps the harness and think, well, it's not brand new, but it's perfectly satisfactory, has got some signs of wear, but it will certainly last another year. And then something happens to accelerate that wear after he's inspected it. And these are the sorts of things in particular to keep your eyes open for. So a cable running through a fibre bearing, for instance, if the fibre washer or whatever it is falls out, then you've got metal on metal, and the wear will be much more rapid than was originally expected. So these things can have a much more sinister impact. Flying damage or damage in flight, either from poor landings or overstressed in flight, pulling too much G or too much speed is the classic two events. And so we need to keep our eyes open for those sorts of things. Sometimes things are missing rather than defective even. So safety cushions are a classic. Sometimes placards are missing in gliders, and they shouldn't be. And things like weights. If it's supposed to have a weight in it, make sure it's in it. And if it's not meant to be there, take it out. Something like vandalism can happen. It's very unfortunate, but that's the age we live in. If we have anything like vandalism, very often it is easy to spot because it's quite blatant, but then we need, if there's any suggestion that there's been a break-in or something like that, we need to take a great deal of care with our daily inspection. And then finally, time has moved on, so things go out of date, and you should be sure that things like the insurance and the C of A or the ARC is in date and it hasn't gone out of date. Moving on to internal threats, well, they're you. So while you're doing this safety critical task, you might find yourself being distracted. Someone comes up to talk to you. And you need to have some sort of plan to ensure that if that happens, you know how you're going to handle it. Knowledge is another area. Do you know enough about your glider? If you don't, then go to the manual, read it, and get some advice, or both. Get some advice from an instructor, perhaps. Your pride is an issue. Plenty of people have come unstuck because they're too proud to ask a question. They feel that if I ask the question, then I'm going to look foolish. Don't become the bystander. So when everyone has said, oh yeah, this crack in the wing is okay, it's been there for ages. If you're not happy with it, don't go with the herd. Stop it there and get some proper technical advice before allowing it to move on. And don't be pressured into getting the job done quickly. So a DI takes as long as it takes, and you shouldn't feel under any pressure to get the glider up to the launch point in time for the flight. Looking at the knowledge, a good place to go is the flight manual. It's a very good start. You should read that. There are also technical data sheets for every glider on the British Gliding Association website. Go and take a look at the technical data sheet for your glider. Placards, are they correct? And very often this is an area where you'd be surprised how often placards are actually incorrect. The maximum all-up weight should be shown clearly. Any matters for centre of gravity adjustment and so on should be clearly displayed in the cockpit. If you can't read them, or so they're illegible, or they're incorrect, then you need to stop the DI there because the aircraft isn't serviceable. Sometimes you'll find differences, particularly with the older manuals, and you'll find speeds perhaps in miles per hour, so the maximum speeds and so on, because the manual is actually pretty old, and you'll then have to make allowance for the fact that the inspector who put the placard in there has adjusted it so that it's in the case of speed, it's in knots rather than miles per hour. And weights very often, so particularly the maximum all-up weight can be different on the placard from the manual, and this is because a number of years ago the British Gliding Association increased the maximum all-up weight of all gliders in the UK by 3%, and then the odd one out, the K13, was increased by 10%, and that's £106. It's gone up from so it's £106 on a K13. It's quite a significant weight difference. So the daily inspection is part of a critical safety system to reduce the possibility of an undesired aircraft state. The pilot is still responsible for the condition of the aircraft, but of course you're doing your bit towards helping ensure that he stays safe. Before doing a DI, you should read the aircraft flight manual first and make sure that you know the key things to look for and that you understand how the aircraft is assembled and so forth. You are human, so you will make mistakes or errors, and when they're 99% of the cause of any accidents nowadays. And if in doubt, ask, don't assume. So, if we assume makes an ass of you and me, is the expression. And so now let's watch the practical video.